Okay, welcome everybody. We are recording, so this will be recorded. If you want the presentation after it's done, just email me. We're going to go ahead and get started. And if you have questions as we go, I'm going to try to pay attention to the chat and answer those questions as we go. So we are just going to get started now. So we're talking about successfully growing the mango in South Florida. Okay, so welcome to Tropical Fruit Tuesdays. This is growing mangoes in South Florida. We have upcoming classes. In 2 weeks, we'll have propagation by seed. We've already done propagation by air layers and grafting. And we're gonna have properly growing avocados September 1st. And September 15th, we're gonna have propagation by cuttings, which will pretty much wrap up all the propagation topics. Okay, so first of all, we talk about this each time, but it's always good to go over it. Where to get information. Good information is hard to find. A really good spot to find information is from the University of Florida IFAS. That's a database that University of Florida keeps. And in order to get into that database, you need to be peer reviewed. You can't just write something and send it in and then it's in there. It has to be peer reviewed, so it's really good stuff. And we do have an EDIS on the mango. It's called Mango Growing in the Florida Home Landscape. I think it's about 12 or 14 pages. It's pretty long, has tons of information, has information on cultivars, planting, pruning, pests, everything you need to know. And there are also EDIS on lychee, longan, other tropical fruit. So if you, and topics as well. So if you Google EDIS space UF space and then put the topic that you want, you'll probably find a really good publication. So another place to get information is other universities. I would put them ranking above just general things you find on the internet. So you can search like mango.space.edu and you'll find information from other universities, usually pretty good. YouTube is not a terrible place to find information. Of course, you're gonna find some bad information there, but you'll also find some good stuff. It's good to watch more than one video on the topic you're looking at. And then always remember that Florida is different from everywhere else. So you have to take that with a grain of salt. Another good place to get information is Master Gardeners. I saw Pat Gill has joined us today. She's a great Master Gardener. Good source of information. Excellent place to get information is your own garden or your own grove. If you pay attention to what's going on there, you're going to be ahead of everybody else. And then always beware of the source of where your information comes from. Just because you read it doesn't mean it's true. Okay, so we'll start with one of my favorite pictures ever. This is when I was giving a talk on the West Coast in Naples to the Master Gardeners, and I was giving them a tour of their own fruit grove, and we came across these Kerry mangoes. There were only 2, and I took this picture, and it says Josephine. It has her phone number, has a smiley face, and then it says, "You touch, you die." That's what she wrote on there. So this is the passion that Tropical Fruit has, the passion of mangoes. And how do we know Josephine was very serious about this? She put her phone number. She was like, okay, just go ahead and call me if you think you're gonna take my Kerry mango. So a lot of passion there. So we're gonna start out with some new information. We're gonna talk about some different cultivars, and I'm gonna break them down into 4 sections. And this is information I mostly got talking to Dr. Richard Campbell. There's a lot of new mango cultivars out there, so I really wanted to present that. So we're gonna talk about some that were made sort of possible by Fairchild Tropical Botanic Garden, the curator choices. We have 2 wild cards that don't really fit into anything here. Then we have Gary Zill selections. And then finally, we're gonna have the Celestial series. which we don't have a lot of information about those yet, but I'll show you some pictures of those. And just so I keep it on track, we do have a few questions that came to me privately. Dan asked, what's the best treatment for mold on bark? Usually on the bark, you don't have mold. It's usually lichens. That just means it's a little shady, a little wet, and those lichens are no problem. So you don't need to do anything with them. Dan also asked, we have an ant issue in our grove. Any suggestions? There are some ant baits you can do. What you need to be careful on is ants getting up into your tree and moving around pests like scale. So one thing that people do is they'll put a band of sticky stuff around the tree so the ants can't cross that band. And then Monterio, by the way, welcome back, Monterio. I've seen you a couple times. He asked, do you mean to cut no more than 1/4 of the tree back annually? Yes, that's what I meant when I said that earlier. Don't try to cut more than 1/4 of the tree back. Okay, so let's move into our cultivar categories. All right, first we'll talk about the Fairchild Tropical Fruit Program. It had a big impact on the fruit industry, and Dr. Richard Campbell and Dr. Norris Ledesma continue to have a big impact on mangoes. They came up with a lot of high quality selections. They changed the vocabulary of mangoes with things like the condo mango, and they did it for 27 years. And they did that through the International Mango Festival, which is no longer taking place this year. It didn't take place because Dr. Ledesma is no longer at Fairchild, and neither is Dr. Campbell. But they do leave us with this legacy. Each year they sold a total of over 23,000 trees. So the first year they sold about 300, the second year is about 500 each. The next 18 years, they sold about 1,000 trees per festival. These were only in 2 days. And I was there selling those trees, so I know they all went out. And then the last 5 years slowed down a little, about 800 trees. So like I said, over 23,000 trees went into homeowners and groves through the Fairchild Mango Festival and Fruit Program. So here's some of the ones that were made popular by Fairchild. You have Coggeshall. It's a naturally smaller tree. If you look at this picture on the left, the tree on the left is a Coggeshall. The tree on the right is a cack. They're both the same age, but the Coggeshall has not been pruned. It's just dwarfy. And the cack has been pruned many times. You see it's much bigger. This fruit does not ship well. It is a heavy bloomer. It doesn't always set a heavy fruit crop though. It comes from June to July, and it's about a pound, or about a ½ pound rather. Okay, the Fairchild mango, another curator choice. The tree may need to be larger to produce well, very disease tolerant, excellent flavor. It's just yellow, so you don't get a lot of color, but it's very good fruit, and it's smaller, 8 to 10 ounces. And remember, this will be recorded, so you don't have to write down all this information that we're going to go through pretty quickly. Okay, Malika, another one, curator choice, has very good commercial potential, very good producer, good size at 10 to 16 ounces, excellent flavor, comes from June to July. And you want your mangoes to come a little earlier in the season, with June being sort of early, because that allows the fruit to not have so much disease pressure, and also pressure from things like storms and hurricanes and things like that. This one you need to ripen off the tree, so you pick it mature, but you don't let it ripen on the tree, and is the only true Indian mango that works in the tropics, in the subtropics. So things like Alfonso that people really enjoy and want, that just won't work well in South Florida. And I've had a lot of growers come to me and want to grow Alphonse, and I always tell them, you know, don't do it. And I've seen some still try, and the trees don't do well because they don't like our humidity. Neelam, another curator choice. Tree stays very small, it's very productive. This one's a late season, so if you want something that's late, This is very late, August to September. Rosy Gold, another curator choice. This one's very early, so it can come from April to May. Has excellent flavor. It can set very heavy and then decline, so don't let it set too many fruit at once. Angie, this one was one of their later choices. It's a curator choice named after Angela Whitman, Angie Whitman. And tree is naturally small, very disease tolerant, excellent flavor. And Dr. Campbell thinks this has a very much commercial potential. So that tells you that this is a winner. And just as an aside, some of the curator choices that were there but dropped later were Ice Cream, Jean Ellen, and Graham. So those were ones that didn't come back year after year. Okay, now we have the two wild cards that are, these are very good. This one is called Lemon Meringue. You may have heard that. It's actually Poo Kalai is the original name. And it's very early and very good flavor. Then we also have Francis Hargrave. You can see very nice small tree, very big fruit, very good set here. Precocious, meaning that it fruits very young, very early. The tree comes in early. It's disease tolerant, productive, has sort of a coconut flavor, easily managed. And it was, of course, originally found in the yard of Francis Hargrave, therefore the name. Okay, Jorge is saying Maurice Kong introduction from the Rare Fruit Council. So I'm not sure what he introduced, Jorge. Oh, Poo Kalai, thank you. So that's good to know. Let's go back. So this one was introduced by Maurice Kong. A lot of you probably know Maurice. Thank you, Jorge. Okay, now we get into the Gary Zill selections. These are a lot of new selections. And Gary Zill is a nurseryman. He has Zill's High Performance Plants, which sells wholesale tropical fruit trees. And what's interesting is he planted thousands of mango seedlings, and then when they were small, he would crush up the leaves and smell them. So he made his selections by scent first. He could smell like what the parents were. And I've seen him do it. He can do it. So a lot of his trees are, this one, Sweet Tart, blooms and sets early. It's variable in size. It needs to be thinned. In other words, it will have a lot of fruit. And if you don't thin them, the fruit will be very small. True to its name, it is sweet and tart, and it has good disease tolerance. So now we're getting into the Gary Zill selections. Little Gem, Jakarta is one of its parents. Season is begins in July. Small fruit and needs to be thinned as well. Tree stays small, sets very well, good disease tolerance, and it has a good, rich Indian flavor. Coconut Cream, another Gary Zill selection. Tree needs to be fairly large to bloom. Fruit are variable in size, flavor is good, and the fruit may look blemished. And it is a vigorous tree, meaning it will be harder to keep it smaller with pruning. Orange Sherbet. This is a Gary Zill selection. Dr. Campbell believes this has a high commercial potential. He has it in his grove. He saves these fruit for his top customers and also for himself and his family. He really likes this one. Season is June 1st to August 1st. It's a small, manageable tree. Blooms easy, excellent flavor, good disease tolerance, good size, good shape. It's pretty and it stores well. So this is one he really, oh, okay. Joyce is saying, please be a little more specific when you say needs to be thinned. Is there a rule of thumb regarding optimal percentage to be cold? So yeah, Joyce, when I say it needs to be thinned, let's say you have a panicle full of fruit, I would take at least a third of those away. So, or third to a half. That's what I would call thinning. But thank you for that question. Okay, now we don't have a lot of information about this, or at least Mr. Campbell was not willing to give it out. This is his Celestial series. So I'm just going to show you some pictures here. You have Plutonic Pleasure, Nectar of Neptune. He has another one named Bolt that I don't have a picture of. Martian Pride, Equinox here, and Sunburst. There you see gorgeous mangoes, and remember he likes early mangoes, good quality, good flavor, disease resistant, smaller trees. So you can imagine this is what we're getting here. Star Wheel, Big Saturn, and Harvest Moon. So it's just some gorgeous mangoes that we'll be looking for in the future. Okay, now we have a little pre-test. This is going to teach you something, hopefully. So let's see if I can get this going. Okay, so what are factors that will bring about a good mango bloom? Cold front. A. B. Low nitrogen in the soil. C. The tree is growing in full sun. D. The tree is not getting irrigation. E. The tree is calm going into the dry season. F. B, C, and D. And G, the classic, all of the above. So if you guys would take a little time to answer that, you don't need to answer that, but we're going to have the same question at the end, and hopefully you will learn something as we go. So we're getting a lot of A, we're getting some C. Well, actually, one person said A, one person said C. 4 people have said, 6 people have said F, and 5 G. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead. Oh, people are still answering, so I'll let them do that. Okay, I'm going to end the poll and share the results so you can see. And so what are factors that will bring about a good mango bloom? The answer, which the majority of you chose, was G, all of the above. So, believe it or not, mangoes can use a good cold front to set a good bloom. If you get a cold front in the dry season, about a month later, your mangoes are going to bloom. B, low nitrogen in the soil. Nitrogen causes trees to grow leaves. So we don't want nitrogen for our mangoes. We want them to produce flowers and fruit. C, the tree is growing in full sun. The trees need full sun to produce good flowers and good fruit. D, the tree is not getting irrigation. So B and D go together. You have the wet season, which we're in now. We get to early November. It stops raining. It gets dry. It gets a little cooler. There's less humidity. So everything's slowing down. If you're giving your trees nitrogen and water, they're not going to know to slow down. So you need to let your trees slow down, let them get into the mindset that they need to be, like E says, calm going into the dry season. They're not growing. They don't have nitrogen. They don't have water. They're just sitting there waiting for the cold front. A, when they get the cold front, that's the thing that tells them it's time to bloom. So they'll do that in about a month after the cold front. Okay, so we'll see this question again, but there was a lot of information there. Okay, so now we'll get into general information about the mango. Some of this information we've covered in other classes, so we won't cover it as in-depth here as we have. So first of all, for your trees, you noticed I gave you all those different cultivars. So properly propagated means you grow something that is a cultivar. It has the characteristics that you want. On the left here, you see some people doing some grafting in a class. You see Mr. Fritz, who is in the top left there. He's attending this class. He could certainly teach this class. And then on the right, we see a mango that has been grafted. So the bottom is a good rootstock, a seedling, and the top is what you want. It is the Francis Hargrave or the orange sherbet. That's what it is. And we take a piece of the orange sherbet and we graft it to a good rootstock, and then we have a clone of the parent plant. Okay, so on the right, you see a mango from seed. On the left, you see a rootstock with a scion that's going to attach there and that's going to grow. So the top will be the mango that you want. The bottom is a strong seedling. What we don't want this seedling for is, why we don't want to grow the seedling is because it's not a clone of the parent. The mother tree, let's say, was the orange sherbet, then it was pollinated by something else. So this young mango is going to be a combination of those two. So it might be great, it might be terrible, it might have bad characteristics. The other thing that's good about growing things by grafting or having trees that were grafted is, if you look on the right, this is a very young tree, about 1.5 years old, and it's already flowering. That's because it's grafted. The piece that was taken to graft to the seedling was already mature, so it can fruit at a very young age. On the left, we have a seedling, and this needs to go through all the stages of sexual maturity, so it probably won't start flowering until 12, 13, 14 years. We're getting some questions, so let me talk about that. Celia says, I have a couple of Choconon/Miracle mangoes. I get fruit in the summer, but not in the winter, as I thought might happen. How do you get them to have that second fruit set in the winter? And, I lost my, okay. And then Steve later says, my Choconon is irregular in its winter production, probably more sensitive to preceding weather than summer fruit it always produces. Yeah, if it says it's gonna give you fruit in the winter, like a second crop, that's probably not gonna happen so much in South Florida because, like I said, everything needs to slow down. So to give fruit in the winter, it would have to be getting ready to fruit in the summer. So I don't think that's something that's really gonna happen that much. Maria says, I'm interested in Namdok Mai. Do you speak about it? Namdok Mai is a very good mango. I didn't put it there because it didn't fall into one of the categories, but it's a great one. Julieta says, can you tell what type of mango a seedling is by the color of the new leaves by comparing them to the mother tree? I would say no. You might be able to get an idea of who the parent is, but you can't really tell by the color of the leaves. Remember, Gary Zill, he can crush that up and smell it and get a pretty good idea, but he's had just decades and decades of experience. Okay, let's keep going. Thank you guys for the questions. Remember, I said the trees need full sun. So we do need, we just had a little power surge here, so hopefully I'll stay online. So we do want to keep our trees well pruned and well spaced. I know Adam, I saw Adam was here. This is actually his grove, so very good spacing. When you put the tree in the ground, you want to dig a hole for it that's a little bit bigger than the container. Check the roots, make sure the roots are not root bound. If they are, go ahead and cut the roots. And like I said, we've had Tropical Fruit Tuesdays on a lot of these subjects like pruning and planting. So I'm going through this a little quicker than I normally would with pruning and planting, but I do have full webinars on that. So if you want the links to that, just email me for that and I'll be able to get that to you. Moriam is asking, what is a good seedling? I'm assuming they're asking what's a good seedling to graft on. So typically the one people use is called turpentine. Celia is asking, when's the best time to prune trees? Mine are too large and need to be cut back, but when? We'll cover that at the end, but I'll just tell you now is a good time to prune. When you pick the fruit, you want to prune right after that. You don't want to prune going too close to the winter because pruning also causes foliar growth and doesn't keep the trees calm. It causes the trees to grow. So when you put your tree in the ground, you want to make sure it's not too deep. So that first root that you see coming out at the top of the root ball, that goes sideways, that's called a flare root. You want that root to be at the ground level. You don't want that root to be under ground. Dan is asking, how long can you expect a mature mango to produce? For many, many years. Dan, if you're asking how long, how many years it can produce, many, 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 many years. And if you're asking how young it can produce, I would say after 2 to 3 years when the tree is big enough. Okay, so once you have your tree in the ground, you definitely need to protect it from basically weed whackers and herbicide, because they will get close to your tree and damage the tree. So here's one way to do it with a sort of a donut of tree trimmer mulch. Another way you can do it is, and you see inside here, there's a little plastic covering. Another way you can do it is just clean out all the grass around it. I've seen companies put like a square of ground cloth around it to keep the weeds down, and that keeps the mowers and the trimmers away. If you look at this, you see on the right here, that's a wheel track of the mower. So you can imagine if this mulch wasn't here, it probably would have got run over by the mower. And I've had some of my trees hit by mowers. So definitely protect your plants. Here's an avocado that died. So we pulled it out of the ground, laid it down, so we're looking at it from above. And what we see here is the flare root I was talking about. So this was planted at a good level right here. There's the flare root. So we wouldn't want it to be planted here. But what we do see is a lot of weed whacker damage, which string trimmer damage, which caused this tree to die, because when you have woody dicots like mangoes, avocados, carambolas, mamey, lychees, longans, they all have this inside. In the middle, this red is called the xylem. That's the wood. On the outside, you have where the blue is, that's the phloem. So if we look at it from the side over here, the phloem, energy that the tree makes goes down in the phloem. And water and nutrients that the tree takes up goes up in the xylem. So when we cut that phloem, we're basically girdling the tree and not allowing it to feed itself. So that's why that's so important that we don't let our trees get hit by string trimmers. Okay, mangoes are very susceptible to herbicide. So I'm going to show you a little video here. This is a group of mangoes, and the herbicide was used to get rid of the weeds, but it got a little too close to the mangoes. So we see some damage, and we know that's going to do long-term damage. So here we go. Oops. Okay. So we look down the line, you see all that herbicide. It's a little wide there. We're going to go under the trees here and see where the herbicide hit the trees. There you see herbicide damage. Herbicide damage right there and there. You see all that herbicide is into the grass. And now under these bigger trees, you also see herbicide damage right here. So we need to be real careful with herbicide. And here's some young mango seedlings where the fruit just fell that were herbicided. Would have been a lot easier just to pull them out. Very easy. So just be careful with herbicide. Be careful with the way you take care of your weeds. Mangoes are very susceptible to herbicide. Okay, our soil is limestone, and the reason I'm telling you that is because it's high in pH. So we're going to talk just a second here about nutrients. You have major elements and minor elements, and the minor elements, don't feel too bad about this chart. I just want to show you something. These elements on the bottom, iron, manganese, boron, copper, zinc, and molybdenum. If you look at the pH, this number on the bottom is the pH. So 7 is neutral. Below that is acidic. Our pH for our soil, because of the limestone, is up here around 7.8 to 8 point, a little above 8. So it's in here. So if we draw that line up here, you see these bars are a little thinner. What that means is these minor elements get trapped in the high pH and they're unable to get to your plants. So for minor elements, to give that to your plant, you're going to use a foliar spray and spray the leaves. For something like iron, they have chelated iron that you mix with water and you put that into the ground and it can go past the high pH because it's chelated. Now we'll have another Tropical Fruit Tuesday on fertilizer, so we'll get into that. Benjamin is asking what are good organic fertilizers to use for mangoes. Dr. Green, if you could help answer that. Dr. Green is an organic grower, but compost is great. If you can start composting and not let sort of leaves and twigs and things leave your property and just compost them, that helps a lot. And I'm sure Dr. Green, I see him working there, he's going to give you some more good information on organic growing of mangoes. He does do that. So here we see a typical fruit tree fertilizer in 839. That's not good for mangoes because remember I told you they don't like a lot of nitrogen. These three numbers are nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. The last number is very good for flowering and fruiting, so you want that number high, but this number is a little too high for mangoes. So a lot of times people will put out like a 0024, which is all potassium. The nitrogen is not so bad when the trees are younger, but when you're trying to get the trees to slow down, flower and fruit, you want high potassium. If your trees are green and they're looking great, don't think you need to put them into a fertilizer regimen. And if you do fertilize, where should you apply the fertilizer? You want to do it on what's called the drip line. So if you look at this picture on the left, that circle is the drip line. So you're going to put your fertilizer from about here, about a foot away from the tree, to about a couple feet outside of the drip line, because that's where all your feeder roots are going to be. And you don't want to clump that fertilizer. If it's granular, you want to spread it out. So throw it like you would chicken feed. Okay, post-test. We still have more to go, but I'm going to give you this second test here. I can't quite get to the second test. Here we go. Okay, post-test. What are the factors that will bring about a good bloom on a mango tree? We should have 100% here. You guys are all bright, smart. Unless you came late, I think you're going to get this. So far, we have 100% of people getting it correct. Okay. Oh, we got somebody who maybe just for giggles got it wrong. A couple people got it wrong. So we're going to end the poll here, and I'm going to share the results. So what are the factors that will bring about a good bloom on a mango tree? Cold front, growing in full sun, low nitrogen in the soil, no irrigation on the tree is calm going into the dry season, or B, C, and D, or all of the above. The majority of you picked all of the above, so you are correct. It is actually, remember, you want the tree, E, being calm going into the dry season, meaning you're not giving it irrigation or nitrogen. And that's also true for lychee, by the way, very important. You want the tree growing in full sun, and a good cold front actually does produce the trees to synchronize and bloom just about a month later after the cold front. So good job, guys. We'll talk quickly about pruning. We're almost at our end of our time here. And what we don't want is a big tree like this where we have to pick our fruit with a picking pole. We'd rather have a good 15 by 15 foot tree. How do we do that? When the tree is young, we do tipping. So we cut the branch like we see here on the left, which will cause all this other branching to come out because we're stopping the apical dominance. So these lower buds are able to come out. So instead of one branch or one single leader, we have 1, 2, 3, 4. If you look at this tree on the right, it actually has 6 growth points. When those get a little bigger, you tip them again. So you're exponentially putting out how many growing points you're going to have. Remember, those growing points are also going to be places where you can get flowers and fruit. So not only are you helping the tree to go sideways and not get too tall, but you're also putting many more places to have flowers. And here's a bigger tree that's going to be tipped all through here. So you see we tip like that. That tipping will cause this sort of branching. So when the tree is older, you have good short internodes, lots of branching like this. Here's a tipping demo. Young tree, ready to be tipped. Tip, tip. Very easy. So now each of those branches will again branch off. You see down below the tree was tipped and it caused 1, 2, 3, 4 growing points. Okay, here was the question of when to prune that we had earlier. So you want to prune after you pick those last mangoes. That's the best time to prune. So if you've already gotten your crop, now is a great time to prune. And what you want to do is kind of control the height if your tree is a little bigger. If it's younger, do a lot of tipping. Celia is asking if you have too much branching, will it cause too much moisture to be trapped and cause mold on the branches or the bracts? No, when you have all that tipping, you're still going to have some good airflow through there. If you feel like you don't have good airflow, you can thin it out a little, but especially when that tree is younger, I would do a lot of tipping. Tom is asking, when is the best time to tip? Tipping, you do that when the tree is younger, before it's getting ready to flower and fruit. So you kind of do that throughout the year and you stop going into the dry season. So around November, you would stop. Once the trees are older, you're still going to tip them, but you're also worried about height control. So tipping, what you don't want to do is tipping or pruning, getting too close to the dry season, too close to November, because if you do that, again, you cause the tree to put out leaves rather than flowers. It's not calm, it's growing. But remember, if the tree is very young, 2 years old, 1 year old, you could still tip it because you're not expecting that tree to come out with flowers because it's too young. Dan is asking, is it okay to top larger mature trees? Mine have grown 6 feet or more, 6 feet or more this season, taking them to over 20 feet. Yeah, that's typical thing that commercial growers do, is they'll top and hedge. So they'll cut the top. Actually, this picture right here is a good commercial grove that's close to my work. And you see they kind of cut it in a rectangle shape. And the trees on the left have been topped and hedged, and the trees on the right were not. What this picture is showing is they kind of pruned a little too late, so they didn't get a good bloom. But the trees they didn't top and hedge do have a good bloom. But yes, you can do that with the older trees. Remember, like I said, though, you don't want to take more than 1/4 of the leaf area. So they just did this grove again, and they did just a nice little topping and a little hedging. The hedging on the side, they did it at an angle. You can kind of see it here where the bottom is wider than the top. Why did they do that? They did that so the entire tree gets sun, the entire leaf area. Okay, finally we'll go when to pick your mangoes. Sometimes it's very easy. Here's some glens. You can see this picture on the left. This color break is telling you these trees are ready to pick. This tree on the right, the color break is telling you that. Some fruit don't really have a color break. So you look at the width of the shoulders when they're very wide. That's when you know they're mature. Another tip you can do is to cut open a fruit that looks like it's ready. And if you see around the seed some darker coloration, that means it's mature and it's ready to be picked. And the reason why these fruit have these color breaks is because they want an animal to come and take them, because that's how they move their seed from one place to the next. So they're actually telling you, hey, look at me. I want you to take me and move me, so you can get an animal to do that. So we're going to look at some trees, some fruit here, and you guys see if you can tell when it's ready to pick. So we're looking at a Glen tree here. You can see those are probably going to be okay to pick, but you see a lot more color. This is a Valencia Pride we're looking at. See a lot of color there. A lot of those will be ready. Here it's pretty obvious which are ready and which are not. Here's one. Now, even these that aren't color breaking, but their shoulders are wide, they were probably mature and they'll probably still ripen. And if you're growing this commercially, that's when you would pick, because you need them to have time to ripen as they travel. You don't want them to ripen, in 2 days. These are some kits on a smaller tree. See, their shoulders are not wide there, so they're not ready to be picked. They're usually picked later in the season. Here's another kit. These are a little wider, so they would probably be okay to be picked. One last thing I want to show you is when you pick, if you leave a little stub like this, you have a much better chance of not having the sap get on your fruit. And remember, mangoes are related to poison ivy. So the sap will actually cause a dermatitis on your skin. You need to be careful. If you get that sap on your hand, make sure you wipe it off or wash it off before you touch any spots on your body that are more sensitive, like around your eyes or your wrists or any areas like that. Okay, Steve says, I topped a few large trees last year, took about 10 feet from the top of 25 to 35 foot trees. My Hayden Glen did not produce well this year, but my Kent and Kit did. So responses do vary. That's true. And you see that. Julieta says, any suggestions on how growers protect their mangoes against iguana, squirrels, and birds? Always a tough question. I have a lot of trouble with squirrels in my home grove. At work, not so much, but I have a big population of squirrels. It's a problem. One thing you can try is netting. Another thing that really works is to pay attention to when those fruit are mature, but they're not showing color, and pick them and beat the squirrels to them. But it's a real problem, especially if you only have one tree. Those squirrels will just outwork you and they'll start nipping at them, and it's a problem. It's tough. I'm not going to say I have a great solution for that. Okay, we're right at time where we should be ending. So I want to thank you guys so much for your time. It was really good to see a lot of you again, and I'm glad you're here. Barbara's asking, if more than half the fruit is ready to pick on a tree, will all of it be ready and ripened, even without color change? So Barbara, the answer is probably yes. But sometimes on the same tree, you have two different crops. Let's say you had two different cold fronts and you had two different blooms. So some of those fruit are behind, maybe even a month or 3 weeks, 2 weeks behind the other fruit. So you have to kind of look. If they're about the same size, then they're probably going to ripen and mature. If they look smaller and they're not as wide, then they're probably a second bloom. So you need to watch your trees and see if they have a second bloom, because then you'll know that they're either all the same crop or two different crops. Okay, so thank you guys. I'm seeing a lot of thank yous, so that usually tells me it's the end of the line. So thank you guys so much. Good to see everybody. And thank you for attending. We'll be doing this again in 2 weeks. So thank you guys. Have a great day. Have a great rest of your week. And I will see you soon. If you do want a copy of this, you can email me and I'll give you the link. And if you want, and usually I give you a link to all the different webinars, so you'll have them if you want. Okay, thank you guys. Have a great day. Bye-bye.